Welcome, everybody. My name is Mark Solowski. I am a CFO who works with Imperial. We do our advisory consulting for small and mid-sized businesses who are small enough that they don't have usually a full-time CFO, but may run into business dealings which revolve around higher level finance and accounting issues that may need some experience that the folks here at Imperial CFOs have. Today we are doing a cybersecurity webinar, and we have joining us today Mike Appollo from SourcePass. He is the Senior Solutions Advisor for them, and Mike has over 20 years of experience in the IT field. So Mike, welcome, and take it away.
Mark, thanks. I appreciate being here and the opportunity to share some information about the cybersecurity and how smaller businesses can help protect themselves a lot better in today's environment, where you hear about so much hacking and breaches and damage to small businesses. What I'd like to do is just give a very, very quick intro. As you had said, I've been doing this for over 20 years. I had owned businesses prior, so my approach tends to be that of a business owner, not somebody who's just in love with technology, but we look at overall goals of what a business wants to achieve and then apply the right technology to that. SourcePass, we're an IT and cybersecurity support provider. We work with companies 20 users and up. We have some accounts that have a few hundred employees. They could have internal IT. They may not have internal IT. We structure them accordingly to be able to provide them the best guidance that we can based on their individual needs. And we operate in multiple verticals, and appropriate to today, a number of those have specific cyber security requirements to meet for governmental standards in order to remain in business and support the clients that they support. That's us.
Okay.
And then very quickly, just so that everyone understands, the way that we approach and simplify the overall IT experience is that we focus on 4 basic areas: just keeping workers productive, making sure that everybody's infrastructure, applications, servers, cloud, everything is available. Today, obviously, we're going to focus our discussion on the third bucket, which is security, keeping data safe and private. And then usually the last thing that we'll do with the company is we'll work on digital transformation, ways that we can help a company either become more profitable, save some money, increase sales, and make other changes that benefit the business overall. And that's really our approach. So with all that said, we can now get into the meat of what we're going to talk about in terms of helping the attendees learn more about cybersecurity. I think, Mark, there were some initial questions on what does today's cybersecurity threat landscape look like. I prepared some information on that, and I'd like you to stop me if you have any questions on any of this. So I'm not going to read through the slides. I would like to highlight, by the way, this presentation will be available to anybody who requests it, through email, through LinkedIn. They're not going to wind up on a call list. I'm just more than happy to send it out. The better businesses are protected and have a better start in the right direction is really all that I'm after when we do this.
Yeah, and Brittany will be able to supply anybody who would like to get a copy of the presentation as well. Just
All
feel
right.
free to email her and she will gladly share this presentation with you.
With that, and that's great. So one of the things that we often see is businesses now, many of the smaller ones still have this attitude of I'm not a target. That's slowly changing. The understanding is, or because the news tends to be about the large companies that all get breached, and you think, well, I'm not Target, I'm not Walmart, I'm not a big hospital system. Who wants my data? Well, extracting a $50,000 ransom or a $100,000 ransom from a smaller business is often quick and profitable. So small businesses, business email compromise, requests for sending money to the wrong bank, far, far more common than anyone really wants to understand. But it's kind of like, if I don't see you, you won't see me. And it's a great reason for webinars like this is to hopefully raise awareness that that happens. As you can see on line 2, that phishing is still the #1 way that breaches occur. People are busy, they're opening multiple emails, they've got lots of deadlines, they read something about your email account is running out of room, log in here, we'll expand the mailbox, and next thing you know, they just gave away their credentials.
Mike, another one that I wanted to ask about is
Yeah.
the quote unquote fake invoice. How prevalent is that one that seems to be coming up lately?
I get more of those in my personal mailboxes than in my business. And that might be because we have an effective spam filter in front, but it is so common. The Geek Squads and the Norton Antivirus, $547. And yeah, it's really very common. And people fall for them. And then what happens is that becomes newsworthy, and then more people are aware, and then the next scam gets hatched. One of the points that I always make, it's always the tail chasing the dog. So the scams come out, people fall for it, awareness is raised, and then you'll find those fall off until the next scam. That's what happens there. We also
Okay.
see a lot with weak passwords. Ransomware is still very common, and it's unfortunate a lot of businesses are not prepared, and there are ways to prepare. Viruses are never going to go away. As long as applications are written, people are going to look for vulnerabilities to exploit. And one of the more common things you're seeing now is what's known as supply chain attacks. And that's where the primary target, and in this case, actually, I use the shopping center target. Hackers will get in through a back door. So Target is using a vendor. The vendor has weak security on their side. From that vendor, they can leapfrog into Target's system. It's the same thing that happened with Jake's 58, the casino here on Long Island. One of their vendors was hacked. That took down machines at Jake's 58. They were closed for 3 days, cost of $2 million. So the hack didn't happen at Jake's, but the impact happened at Jake's. So these are probably the most common as far as the current threat landscape.
Now, does that supply chain attack also propagate to other companies because one in the supply chain was compromised?
Exactly. And a lot of these applications are written not from the ground up, not from scratch. They're written using other applications and programming interfaces. And unless every one of those applications remains current and patched and aware of how they are impacted by any of these vulnerabilities, it's a way in. It's just a backdoor, which kind of leads us into the next arena, which is where we get into things like the Internet of Things. where we're all adding devices. Well, maybe shouldn't say all. I'm adding devices. I'm adding a Ring doorbell or a smart thermostat, TVs that can connect to everything. Businesses in the industrial Internet of Things are adding surveillance cameras and door access systems and temperature sensors and glass break sensors. And every one of these things requires a level of connectivity. And every one of these has potential weaknesses. And so, again, they're just looking for a way in the door. And so these Internet of Thing devices can often provide that. And there are ways to protect from that. You can segregate these devices, put them only on their own network. And, we could talk more about what it takes to do that. But the more common these devices become, it's hard to keep track of them all, to remember everything you have, and then make sure that every one of those are updated. And then, of course, not every one of these is designed to be updated or able. They're using older, less intelligent operating systems. And there are ways in. But thankfully, there are ways to protect yourself, which is great. And the other emerging tech today is artificial intelligence, which is really kind of, it's interesting. AI is being used by people who write ransomware, or it's really being used by people who are writing phishing messages. I don't know if you've noticed, but the grammar, the spelling, all of that is now better. People are using ChatGPT, and they're running their phishing emails through grammar checkers. So they look a lot more official.
Plus, yeah, not the fractured English that a lot of them seem to have had in the past.
Absolutely. That has been a noticeable change, which makes it harder to detect. If the bank's logo looks so real and the grammar is so correct, and you think there's my bank account might have been compromised, I need to log in and resecure my password. They're all written better, and obviously with a sense of urgency and danger and all of the things that make a phishing message immediately actionable and compelling.
Well, I saw a note. Okay, this one really got me. I had to read it multiple times, and it said, here are legitimate email addresses, and here is a not legitimate. And both of them were Citibank.com.
Mm-hmm.
And I read it, and it looked normal. But then it was pointed out, it was one of those ones almost like flashcards. You get the answer. And the A in the Citibank was a Cyrillic A.
Yep.
And I'm like, holy mackerel, that one got me. I was really, truly astounded by the fact that you have to look at the fonts of the email addresses to make sure they're all consistent.
It's so funny that you say that. It's really easy to overlook small changes. So we had a prospect that came to us with they suspected a business email compromise. Somebody had spoofed the name of the new CFO, who wrote to one of the accounting staff and said, hey, I want to catch up on collections. Send me an aging report. Let me know who owes us money and give me contact information. And when you looked really closely, or when you looked quickly, it looked legitimate. Everything about it looked fine. When you looked really closely, you could see that there were subtle changes. But the accounting clerk sent out the information, and immediately an email went out to everybody on the contact list providing a different bank to make payments to. So they weren't actually compromised, but they were very easily spoofed.
I've seen that one. They send the payments to a different bank thing.
Right. But even the internal employee, you just said, and it was the new CFO, and of course, that's one of the ways to get people to respond, right? You can scour LinkedIn and find the new hire, the new VP of finance, the new uh, sales director, whatever it might be, and it's pretty easy to tell who reports to who. So now you spoof that new person. You send an email to all the underlings who want to please the new person, right? Because we all want the new hire to see what great employees we are,
Right.
and you respond. And it's worse on a cell phone, because on a cell phone, if you're looking at the mail, typically you only see the name. You have to click a couple of times in order to get the email address. So you
Oh,
see new VP of finance on your phone. Oh, they want this. Well, oh, here's the information you want. So you've got to stop. You know, think, should I really be doing this? Maybe I need to verify. Maybe I should wait until I'm in the office and check. So,
I will be the first one to admit that I like to use my computer, not my phone.
mhm.
And it's a personal preference. Reading glasses, I like being able to see it on a computer screen rather than on a phone screen, because the phone screen's kind of small.
Oh, I agree. I would rather, but we hired a new VP of sales, and I'm sitting on the couch, and she happens to be in Las Vegas. So her time's 3 hours behind mine. 8 o'clock at night, I'm relaxing, but I see an email. And the tendency, if I can answer it quickly on my phone, is to answer. This is my new boss. All right. She's working. It's 5 o'clock her time. She's working. I want
Mhm.
to be helpful. And immediately I want to do that. And I thankfully we received the training, but I had to stop myself. My first reaction was let me get her the information she wants.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Um so human beings, a human firewall is still the best option. You can stop most hacking if people were to be better able to respond to scams. And so we are strong proponents of an ongoing security awareness training program. You watch videos, you take some quizzes. They're not hard, but you can't just get up and walk away. The reinforcement comes when these fake phishing messages come on a staggered interval, and then you measure and see how people respond. And if they respond badly, you send them back for retraining. If they prove to be a true business risk, that's a harder conversation. And we won't set up new email accounts now for new clients without having multi-factor authentication. And it really should be on everything. And that's, we're all used to dealing with that, I think, a little bit now. You log into your bank account and you'll get a code, a 6-digit code. You log into various things, you get a 6-digit code, and maybe you can have it remember you for a certain amount of time. But it is always best to periodically need to re-authenticate. And I've had clients in the past who were resistant. It's just another thing, right? Security is not convenient. There are walls. I want to do my job. I don't have to stop and do anything. It's not convenient. So finally, it was an accounting firm, and they finally implemented this. And 2 or 3 months after, and I always hear this, I would never fall for that. That would never happen to me. But this was one of those log in and will increase your mailbox size because you're running out of room in the middle of tax season. I can't have my email down and logged in, and everything was fine. And then 3 days later at 3 o'clock in the morning, an alert went off on his phone. Hey, are you trying to log in? And he knew what he did. He knew he gave it away. But he also knew that having this in place protected him. And it should be on everything, every application, anything where there is critical data, access to anything that you don't want anyone else to have needs to be on there. The other thing that we're strongly suggesting is something called conditional access. You can only access company data on approved devices. An example of that is my laptop and my phone. Those are the only two things that I can use to get at my my business email. That's it. I can't get to email anywhere else. I can't get to company data for anywhere else. And I have restrictions on what I can download. And I'm not offended by this. I'm here 17 years and I am restricted, right? Because on this, the next day I could wake up unhappy and maybe I'll pull down everybody's information. In the IT world, I have access to a lot of client information. So we're protecting my company, but we're protecting the 2,500 clients and the 15,000 endpoints that we're protecting by limiting that access. So these are all, there's a list of things to do, but basically we're talking about only giving people access and rights to do what they need to do to get their job done, nothing more.
So with the conditional access, is that something that's done at a server level, or how is that implemented? Because I see the wisdom of that and I think that's great, but how is it actually implemented?
In a modern world where most people are moving their servers and authentication into some kind of a cloud environment, and in our case, we're primarily a Microsoft Office 365 company. Those are all policies that can be driven through the authentication process. So if you have on-prem servers, it's if you have a server in your building, it's a little bit harder, a little bit more challenging. But in a cloud world, it's just implemented by policy.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's the plan. It's to be able to make sure people can only do what they need, have access to only what they need to access. Because then if somebody's compromised, they're not giving away everything. And that's really the point. And that kind of dovetails into looking at cybersecurity as a whole. And the focus initially is on what we would call the perimeter, everything outside of your business. And that is shifting, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But it starts, as I said, you want to make sure that people are trained, right? You want to keep your people. That's your front line is your human firewall. But taking that inside, you want to have a very strong, highly regarded antivirus application. We don't recommend any of the free ones that are out there. They're like tissue paper. They don't really protect you. We operate mostly on one called Sentinel-1. And again, we have thousands and thousands and thousands of desktops that we manage and protect. CrowdStrike is another great one, Bitdefender. There are a list that are quite good. And there are a couple of components to that. So your standard antivirus, there's known viruses out in the universe. You open up a file, it gets compared to this known list of viruses. If it appears clean, everything opens up and runs, and it happens in nanoseconds. Nobody sees it, but you're protected. Unfortunately, new viruses are written so quickly. You may have heard the term 0 day, which means nobody's discovered this yet. This is new, this is now. And if that happens, the antivirus application companies won't have written a protection. It's the tail chasing the dog again. So there's a component called EDR, endpoint detection and response, and that really should be on within every organization, and that's behavioral. So there's a baseline that your computers get measured at. This is what they normally do, and then there are parameters outside of that if your computer is misbehaving, it's doing things it doesn't ordinarily do, it'll get flagged and likely walled off from the rest of the network. It's trying to access data it wouldn't ordinarily access or doesn't have rights to. It's trying to randomly send out hundreds of emails, whatever it might be, some behavior that just doesn't seem right. It's suspicious. So it's behavioral based. And that dovetails into MDR, which is monitored. It's EDR that's monitored. And that would go to a company like ours or another qualified managed IT service provider that will get alerts. And ideally, that's a 24/7 scenario. The bad people don't sleep. So these alerts will go off in the middle of the night, and you want somebody who can react to that. You want an anti-spam, anti-phishing filter. It's a delicate balance. If it's tuned too tightly, legitimate email gets caught and everybody gets angry. If it's not tuned tightly enough, spam gets through, and then you have to rely on people to think. So, you play the game. You have to balance. Your security it's a teeter-totter game. It's got to be tight enough to protect you, yet still allow for business productivity. So there's always, always, always fine-tuning that goes on. Everything should be updated, systems patched, applications patched, nothing out of date to the best degree possible. Access controls, who has access to what devices have access to, what processes, all of that has to be well thought out and carefully crafted. So we take all of that into account. There's when you go a little deeper, you can do network logging. There's a way to look at data as it goes through your entire network out to the cloud and back. Again, looking for suspicious behavior. That typically requires a security operations center to monitor. There are some false positives, but anything that requires reaction, you want somebody who's looking at it and reacting. And there are a couple of others that are listed. But again, I don't want to spend too much time on anyone's slide unless you have questions.
Yeah, I was going to say, does anybody on the webinar have any questions up to this point? Sounds like no questions so far, so let's continue on.
Hopefully we're keeping everybody awake.
Oh, Gershon.
Hey,
I got a
Gershon.
question.
Yeah.
Firstly, Mark, thank you. You're doing a marvelous job here. I think maybe you'll take over permanently. And Mike, you're doing a marvelous job too. Thank you very much. It's very interesting. Is there ever a point when you've gone too far in terms of security? Meaning, like you're saying, you could be up all night. There's new viruses coming every day. You never, obviously, all these things are nightmare scenarios, but on the flip side, is there a point when you say, if we have to go this far, we can't do anything, and that's just a risk we're going to have to absorb?
I wouldn't say that there's a point at which you go too far. There is a point at which the controls you're putting in place are hindering the ability to really do business. And you find that really very quickly. And sometimes it's just a matter of ego. I'm the owner of the company. I should be able to do whatever I want. We have absolutely faced that. And sometimes that makes a client a bad fit. Your reputation is our reputation. If you are breached and it was known that you're under our care and feeding, and we allowed that to happen, that's a terrible look for us. So sometimes that does. So I don't know that you can go too far. As long as people have the right to do what they need to do, and other people can't get at that information, you're in a good place. Does that answer?
I think so. I mean, I think the answer is if you can't get your job done, then in practice we've gone too far, and I guess they have to find other solutions. But then, unless and until we reach that point, the more secure, the merrier.
Yeah, and it's really very rare that you take somebody to that edge. There are some baseline standards that that this is where we should start, and then you do tighten things up, and then you start to get some complaints, And then, okay, how do I loosen this restriction and still keep it secure? And
Excuse me.
it does get technical, and I wouldn't suggest that the casual home or business user, but a qualified IT individual will be able to find that balance.
Got it. I have another question.
Yeah.
Unless someone else has questions first. The thing that you mentioned about having only qualified devices, I mean, if the only place where anyone can access anything is my computer and my phone,
Mhm.
then that's very, it seems to me that on a straightforward level, that's incredibly secure. I mean, you've blocked almost everything unless there's a workaround for the hackers. Like, can somebody else take over my computer and then they are my computer? Or is it as simple as it sounds that only if you have my physical hardware can you access anything?
Um, that is a great question. It's very hard to work around when you say these are the only things that you can use. And remember I said before that sometimes it's not convenient. So while I don't surround myself with a ton of technology. I have my office laptop, a personal desktop, an iPhone, an iPad. Many of us have that. And sometimes I'm sitting on my personal laptop, and it would be so much more convenient if I could access my email, my business email on my personal laptop and answer some questions. Um, Instead of having to either wait and pick that up or whatever, but it's not secure, right? My company does not know if I have strong antivirus software or what my browsing habits might be on my personal gear. So
Right.
you are increasing the security dramatically by limiting the access to specific devices. Absolutely. And then of course you want to require, by policy. So my phone is my phone. I had to give consent to my company to manage my phone. And then my company mandates I must use Microsoft Outlook. I can't use the native Apple email app. I must have a strong password on my phone. Right? If that device doesn't meet my company's security requirements, I can't use it.
For
So
company work, you can still use it for personal stuff.
right. Oh yeah,
Okay.
exactly. I wouldn't be able to access my company's data, my company OneDrive, SharePoint, email. But yes, I could use my phone for whatever else I wanted to use it for.
I've seen an increase again in company issued cell phones,
Mhm.
where the company issues you a cell phone. It's used specifically for business and business email and all of that. And, the person is juggling two phones because they have their work phone and their personal phone.
That is correct. Now, again, in my case, it's one phone, but we use mobile device management. That's really what that is. The heading for that is mobile device management. I've given consent for my company to put certain restrictions on my device, and I'm okay with that. If I were not okay with that, I would need a company device. If I said, no, I don't want anybody being able to touch my phone at all. If I were paranoid, I don't want you reading my text messages. They can't read my text messages. But, but what people think might happen, they're scared of. So yes, so some people will say, we're just going to give you a company device and call it a day. But those are also managed by the company.
So let me pose something on that. Does the control of your phone actually allow or disallow your downloading of apps? So if you have a new app or whatever, is that going to, if it's not on a list, does the company not allow you to download that, or how does that work?
No, I can download apps on my phone. But none of the apps that I have on my phone have access to any of my company data. So that's all locked down.
Okay.
I can't even cut, if you send me an email to my source pass address and it's got your signature with a phone number, I can't even copy and paste your phone number into my phone to dial. So there are restrictions with data going between the apps. And that's why it's okay for me to download an application.
Okay.
That's a great question. One of the other questions that came up in preparing for this was the idea of moving to something that I guess people are hearing about called zero trust. It's not really complicated. It sounds like it would be, but it's really not. If you think of zero trust, I mentioned about the prior thought about network security was the perimeter, protect anybody from coming inside, build a wall. Imagine that your house was that wall and somebody had the front door key and they get in your house. Now they're in. Zero trust, the principle of zero trust is, what if you put a different lock on every room, every door in your house? So it's no longer a master key. Okay, I got in, but if I want to use the bathroom, I need a different key. And I might not be authorized to use the bathroom in the master bedroom. So that's got its own key. And my kids' bedrooms each have their own key, and they won't work for each other's. So it's zero trust is now protecting from the inside. That's if you keep that image in mind, you'll have an idea of what that's all about. So again, least privilege use. Exactly what do you need access to get your job done? I am always going to verify who you are. Your role might have changed, and it might have changed 10 minutes ago. Your access rights need to change with your role. So we're always going to verify, should you have access to this data? Right? The micro segmentation, again, dividing up your network. Only specific people, devices need access to this portion of your network, this piece of your data. And that could be role-based, function-based, whatever it might be, but it's separating. You build your network assuming there's a breach. So you start with what if a breach occurred? How can we minimize any damage, minimize any traffic across this network? Can we compartmentalize? And Gershon, getting back to your point, are we doing it in a way that still allows everybody to get their job done? So you open that up. You start with a closed hose spigot, and you open it, and that's the amount of data that needs to come through, and that's where you stop. You need a function for continuously monitoring the data flow through your network, looking for suspicious activity, looking for access rights that have been violated, and then a way to continuously protect that data, whether it's encrypting it, making sure you're backing it up, doing everything you need from the standpoint of, again, if I got breached, could I recover? We spoke about the secure devices. What is allowed to access? Who is allowed to access? From where? What application should have access? So it's segmenting internally. We're assuming the walls are breached. We're assuming that you're in my network. What do I have to do to keep each piece safe? That's zero trust. And security, there is no I'm secure. Right? It's not a destination. It's not an endpoint. Security isn't. It's always going to change. Somebody's going to come out with something new and then a new way to exploit it. What do we have to do to fine tune and readjust our policies in order to continue to protect ourselves? It's an investment. Security, as I said, it's not convenient. It's also not cheap. But what is particularly frustrating to me is when a company invests a fortune after they've been breached, instead of less of a fortune if they thought about it before. We picked up a new client, a manufacturing client, that was the perfect storm of everything wrong. Literally, it was like if you picked a bad practice, that's what it was like walking in. It was a Microsoft lab of bad things to do. Everybody had administrative rights to their computer. They could install whatever they wanted. They all shared the same password because this way everybody could log into everybody else's computer and do everybody else's job. They were backing up to external hard drives that were physically attached to their server. None of those backups were going off site anywhere. One person got compromised, the entire network got compromised. And talking to this particular client, we were sort of laughing about it afterwards. They're like, I wonder if they were disappointed at how easy it was to totally take our network down. They were down for 2 solid weeks and had to pay a 6-figure ransom. It's ugly. So
That's very ugly.
yeah, and they're wonderful, wonderful people. And we rebuilt their network from the ground up. They are now well protected. Thankfully, they had some cyber insurance, but still 2 weeks. 2 weeks, a bad reputation, not being able to satisfy client orders, risking those clients go buy their stuff from somebody else, and now they become somebody else's client. There's a huge rolling impact to not properly protecting yourself. And it dovetails back to the I'm not a target. You are. It really, everybody's a target.
Yeah. We have about 15 minutes left here, Mike. So let's kind of plan accordingly. I know we could spend 3 hours on this because I could spend 3 hours on it. But let's kind of see what we can get done in the next 10 minutes or so and leave a few minutes for questions.
Absolutely. So part of preparing in a zero trust, but almost really in any environment, is putting together an incident response plan. And to keep it really brief, it is a thorough, pre-thought out plan so that you know what you have, you know who's responsible for implementing what pieces of the plan. You've got a methodology for detecting if there are any issues. You've come up with a way that you're going to contain, minimize the damage, completely eliminate the threat, and then recover. You can do a post-mortem afterward. What went well, what didn't go well, what do we have to modify? But having this in advance, having a rehearsal, is so much better than being unprepared with the what do I do now? And you could either write that on your own. Companies can write on their own. They could write it in tandem with their IT service provider. But even just in preparing this plan, you'll expose some gaps. Where do we have to tighten things up? Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right.
One question that I have on that
Yep.
is, and this is more kind of a business type of question, but in that particular incident planning, is there anything that you've seen about external communications to customers, clients, vendors, all of that, that are standard practices when you have been compromised and you need to notify other people?
There are standards of a certain amount of, and I don't, forgive me, I don't know those numbers off the top of my head, but yeah, if once you have noticed a breach and you've figured out what left the building, you do have to notify people if personal information has been compromised. You do have to notify the authorities. You want to collaborate with your vendors and figure out where, if they were involved in any of that. But where there is definite personal information that has left the building, critical business financial information, that level of communication needs to be included as part of the preparation phase of your plan. There is a communication section. What do we do? And that might be based on the incident classification. What level? What was the nature of this particular breach, and what got away? And that does lead to one other thing that we didn't cover in great detail, but there's something called a security information and event monitor, SIM. I mentioned before that tracks all the data flow throughout the network.
Mhm.
That's a really important, it's I guess it's not cheap, but it's an important tool. If you know you've had a breach, but you can't say with any certainty this is what was taken, the only logical assumption is everything was taken. So having this tool in place at least allows you to say, they got my grandmother's cookie recipe out of my documents folder, but they didn't get this client list. Or they got these 10 client records. Let's take care of those 10 people, but the other 5,000 are fine. So you want to be able to try as much as you can. You have to balance you against your budget, but you want to get as much information and be able to capture as much of that as you possibly can.
Okay.
Yep, and that'll lead back to your communication piece.
Mike, can you
Yeah.
repeat again, what is it that you would do to be able to capture that? Is that by having stronger controls on like who can access files or records of who accesses each file, so you can see when something like this happens?
Well, there's a tool called a SIM, Security Information and Event Monitoring Tool, that literally captures every data move, every data transaction throughout your network.
Got it.
So you would go back and review the logs in the time period of the suspected breach, and you would be able to see what data went where.
And how does that work in a cloud-based data set?
Great question. There are connectors into the major cloud players, so you can monitor that traffic in and out of Office 365 and G Suite and the major cloud providers.
Okay.
Yep. I mentioned before that the supply chain is often attacked. I won't go into great detail. The one thing that I will just strongly suggest when you get to here is vet your vendors. So a lot of our clients are receiving questionnaires from their clients. Tell me about your security policies, right? Do the same with your vendors. Tell me about your security policies. Are you certified compliant in a particular, are you like SOC 2 compliant? Are you ISO 27001 certified? But even if not, are you backing up your data? Are you patching your systems? What are you doing to ensure that when I do business with you, my data is safe from you? The application I am buying or renting from you is safe. How are you protecting yourself? So having that is a great first step in protecting yourself in the supply chain. Also, if you are part of a supply chain, ensuring that your particular piece is secure. And communication. You want to make sure that you're sharing information back and forth. I mentioned before that there are specific businesses that have compliance frameworks, requirements with which they must meet, guidelines. Mark, if I can share before the call, you mentioned HIPAA.
Yes.
So there are a set of rules and standards in order for a company to be considered HIPAA compliant. It's the same thing in the financial industry, the auto industry, which with loan origination and everything else has their own, the GLBA standards that they must meet. The Department of Defense has requirements for providers. If you're not even the direct supplier, if you make a screw that holds in a piece on a Lockheed jet, you, the screw manufacturer, have to adhere to Department of Defense standards. And it's easy to find what these frameworks are. You run a risk assessment against the standards, and they're challenging, But if you've got the internal staff that can do it, you can do it as a self-assessment if you know all the answers, or you can work with your IT or cybersecurity provider. But basically, you run this risk assessment and then you compare it against a standard. You come up with your gap. Here's where I am. Here's where I need to be. And from there, you build what they call a plan of action and milestones. What do I have to do to go from here to here? And then you show what that roadmap with timelines is going to look like. So it's progress. We know that we have these holes. We want to fill in these holes. And then you want to make sure you maintain that. Ignorance is not an excuse. There are a lot of companies that'll do these assessments, but then they don't move along that path. There's danger in that, because if you've done the assessment, you now have this gap analysis. Now you know where things are off. And now if you don't fill those in, now it's negligence. So, again, you want to, if you're building this plan of action and milestones, you want to make sure you hit it. And there are ways to record that. There are online platforms that'll let you keep track of all your policies, your acceptable use, your incident response plan, any of the policies that go along with a secure business, anything where you need to meet some of these guidelines. You can capture that and then provide a very simple report. So compliance does drive a lot of security needs. We had a client that, using Lockheed as an example, would have lost $1 million contract had they not met a specific compliance level. Necessitated a $50,000 or $60,000 investment. When you compare, if I don't do this, I lose $1 million in business. It helps you understand why you need to make the investment. So we can point to that. But when you get outside of that, as I had mentioned, a lot of our clients are seeing their clients just want to know, do you meet a standard? And there are some known standards, easy to find the information. The NIST cybersecurity framework is an example. The Center for Internet Security has their own set of standards, 18, 20 rules to comply with, but they all fall into pretty much these 5 categories. Identify what you need to protect, your staff, your data, your devices, your processes. Put the protection in place that you need to have in place. So that's your antivirus, any of the zero trust principles, your backups, whatever it might be. Have a means to detect if there's unauthorized activity. Have a way to respond. It's got to be a written plan, well-crafted, well-documented, and a recovery plan. You want to have it written out. Here's how I get back on track if there is an incident. If you cover these, you're really very well covered from a cybersecurity standpoint. It's these 5 basic principles. If there's any other takeaway, this is a great takeaway. Just to be able to make sure your business is moving in the right direction, if that makes sense.
Well, I'm chuckling a little bit because most companies are very versed in the last 3, but not the first 2. Because once they get breached, they detect it, they have to respond to it, and then they have to recover from it. But you have to do the first 2 to make sure that you can limit the damage from
Yeah, a
any
lot of
intrusion.
people, Mark, are also, they're missing the written piece. We
That's
sort of
true.
know what we have to do, but if somebody said, show me your incident response plan, they would have no idea. And there are downloadable templates. To get a full set of necessary plans might cost a business $10,000. I'm not suggesting that somebody needs to go out and do that. You can, but start somewhere. So as I said, security is a journey. Start somewhere. It does not have to be, I've got to look at this whole thing and wrap my arms around everything all at once. If you have good antivirus with EDR, great. If you're training your people on how to respond to phishing and similar scams, that's awesome. If you have the ability to limit the access to certain devices and people, you're like 90% of the way where you have to be. And then following with these other written plans will put businesses in a great place. But don't hesitate. Don't not start because you think the topic is overwhelming. Put something in place. Lock your car door. Right? Do something.
I think that that's probably, if there's a takeaway, that's probably the one of the best is the fact that do something, put some action in place so that you are working on making your network more secure rather than sitting there wringing your hands and saying, oh, it's so overwhelming, I don't know where to start.
So there are companies, ours included, that will offer a security risk assessment. And they will tell you where your gaps are. They will craft a plan, and they'll put something in your hands. And then you could either engage them to remediate or not, but you have a deliverable. One of the other things that if people want to request it of Brittany is I have a cyber readiness. It's a single page. It is by no means fully comprehensive. It is just a single page checklist that I would be more than happy to provide. Just looking down about, do you have your backups? Are they offsite? Have you tested? You know, that kind of thing. So, a lot of people have the recover in place, but they haven't tested it. How do you know it works?
Okay.
So that's, again, getting the guidance of a security professional is always helpful. It isn't necessary to start, but there are means to get it done. There are means to put yourself on that path.
Okay. We've only got a couple minutes left here. I'd like to open it up to anybody who might have any additional questions, either via chat or just take your microphone off mute and add into the conversation.
Is that Clifford? Are you?
Yeah, hi there. Cliff Franklin from Cybersecurity. I'm probably the ringer in the room.
Uh-oh.
Mike, thanks a lot for that. A lot of good stuff there. I just want to add one thing that I always add to any cybersecurity discussion, and that is, until you have a physical security plan, your cybersecurity plan isn't much use. So really, you got to remember to lock down your physical premises, as well as locking down your logical side of your business. You mentioned IoT devices. I would make a recommendation there. Make sure that the company that is installing your IoT devices have been verified secure and practice good security practices. And then lastly, the notifications. One thing that worries me about notifications now is there's so many different state regulations for notifying as to a breach, because New York has one set of notification requirements. California has a whole host of notifications. So, Mike, how do you handle the notification side of things?
To be totally transparent, I leave that to the Chief Information Security Officer and our highly credentialed team to craft the plan for each individual client. Yeah, it all depends upon where they are located. Are they just in New York? And with all the various acts, the SHIELD Act and the whatever it might be, I let them navigate those waters with each client on an individualized basis. I do like the point, Clifford, about the physical security. So we are talking about literal doors and key fob and monitored access. Do people need to be able to wander through each facility? And believe it or not, we're all taught to be ridiculously polite, right? So you're entering a building, you see somebody holding a bunch of packages looking like they're fumbling for their fob. It's almost natural to hold the door open. It's a large enough company and you don't know everybody, and you think that person belongs there, you let them in, right? The term is tailgating. So you are politely allowing a potential threat into your building. They can wander around looking for a computer that's open and unlocked. if your computer policies don't set for your computer to lock on its own after 5 minutes of inactivity, 10 minutes of inactivity, there are open machines that people can sit down at using the rights of whoever is logged in. So yeah, you want to keep the exterior doors locked and alarmed and all that, but your interior, who has access to your server room if you still have a server room? It should be, in an ideal world, it should be a fob, and you should be able to call up reports of who went where. At the very least, it should be a locked door.
Okay. Well, any other questions out there? All right. Thank you, everybody. Glad you could join us. Mike, thank you very much for all of that information. Again, reiterating that there are multiple source documents that are available from either Mike or from Brittany. Feel free to reach out and ask for any of those so that you can have this handy and hopefully prevent any type of IT incident in your small business rather than having to react to that such same situation, which is, as you say, Mike, much more costly, much more inconvenient, and could potentially be a major long-term damage to your reputation
Oh
as
yeah,
a company and a business.
exactly. Well, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to be here and share some of this information.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Mike. Thanks, Mark, for
Uh,
Thanks,
stepping in.
everybody. Okay.
Right.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.